we'll give him a couple minutes and then I may turn him on. The agenda shows that we're going to start with introductions, and I think we've done that before, so we have our name places, so I don't think that's necessary. I was just going to note that we have a new member from representing Ivy Tech, Laura Hayes. She's right there. Hi, Laura, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Laura Hayes. I am the Director of K-14 Transitions at the Terre Haute campus. All the college connection coaches at that campus report to me, and then I also am still working with Park Heritage High School, which is one of our schools that's been very successful with pathways and with dual credit in the state of Indiana.
Great. Well, we look forward to working with you. Appreciate you being here with us today. Is this the second of our 3 meetings, or the second? And we have one more that's in October. So you're getting right here. We spent most of our first meeting reminding ourselves of what we had done in the past, and so now the real work begins. We're going to start today. The Commission recently announced our next 2019 award winners for the Teacher Recruitment Funds. This is our program that we've been running for the Commission since 2015, I think, Eugene. Where are you?
Right here.
There you are, right here. He actually presented this at our Commission meeting last week as well. And so he's going to spend a little time going through what we're doing. It's especially pertinent to this group because in addition to trying to recruit and retain STEM teachers, we obviously look very specifically at the preparation of dual credit teachers in those STEM areas as well, as you're familiar with. So some cases, a couple of them I think are new, and a lot of them are returning. We're granted $10 million over the biennium from the legislature, of which we carve out $9.6 million that we give in grants. And with that, I won't take any more of Eugene's thunder. Eugene Johnson is a member of the Commission staff, has been with us for a long time, and actually he was a member of the SASE staff before the Commission and SASE merged, and has been spearheading the work with this particular program, along with many others. So thank you, Eugene.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. My name is Eugene Johnson. I'm with the Commission for Higher Education, and going to talk to you a little bit about the STEM Teacher Recruitment Fund grant that the Commission administers. Really going to focus on what the dual credit impact has been in terms of this grant and how grant funds have been used to ensure that teachers have the qualifications to continue to provide dual credit teaching and education within K-12 around our state. So a little bit about the Recruitment Fund grant. So it was initially funded back in 2013. So the General Assembly funded this grant for $10 million. Initially, it was administered by the Education Roundtable and the Center for Education and Career Innovation. When those groups disbanded in 2015, the legislature moved the administration of the program over to the Commission for Higher Ed, and it's been the same $10 million that has been funded since inception. So that's $40 million since 2013. What are the goals of the grant? Well, 3 main goals. The first one is to encourage the growth of existing organizations who are providing STEM education and recruiting for STEM teachers within the state of Indiana. Continue to support the establishment of new STEM programs to get STEM teachers in the state of Indiana, and then identify organizations and programs that are matching STEM teachers with school corporations, especially those who are experiencing shortages of qualified STEM teachers. A little bit about what has been done so far. This is just numbers. This is information related to reports that has been provided to the Commission. Each year there are 2 reports that grantees have to provide to the Commission, one in July and one in December. So this is information just based off the prior round, the 2017 grant group of funding. With those funds, over 550 STEM teachers enrolled in or completed coursework that was necessary to maintain or establish dual credit STEM teaching qualifications. And then over 250 school corporations had at least one teacher who participated in training and taking courses necessary. So we touched a huge portion of the state. In a little bit, we'll talk to a few of the providers of some of those programs just to get their thoughts and impact on what they've been doing with STEM grant funds.
So as I mentioned, Eugene, you will be familiar with a lot of this because we did go through some of this before. So what we're going to really do is provide a little background and then the updates for what we're doing this year. So some of this seems familiar, but some of you may not have been here for that. So that's why we really wanted Eugene to do at least a high-level review too.
So what I want to go through now is since the Commission has had this program, we've had 3 cycles of grant funding, 2015, 2017, and 2019. You can take a look and see the numbers of applications we've received and how many we funded and at what amount. So back in 2015, we received 16 applications. We provided 13 grant awards. In 2017, we had an increase of 53%. So we got 25 applications and funded 16 grants. And this past cycle, which is the 2019 grant that we just provided funding for in the last couple of months, again, we received 21 applications and 16 grants awarded. For the 2017 grant cycle, you'll see the big increase again, 56, I said 53, excuse me, that's 56%, and a 23% increase in awardees. How that came about, people will probably look about that was a big increase. When HLC updated their requirements for dual credit, for teachers to be eligible to teach dual credit, we saw an increase in the number of providers, that's your public, private universities, other organizations who are in the field of recruiting and retaining STEM teachers who apply for grant funds. At that point, the commission had took over that grant, and the first thing that our office was told is you have the only STEM dollars in the state, to which my initial thought again was no pressure there. So, but we saw that increase, and again, we had 8 new grantees in 2019. A few entities, who applied in 2017 did not apply again, so we had a little bit of a decrease, but again, we awarded another 16 grants, and we had 3 new grantees there. Looking at the funding, so in 2015, we funded roughly $2.4 million of the grants that were awarded went to providers who were making sure that dual credit qualifications were going to be met for teachers. 25% of the total amount of funding, the 9.6 that the commissioner noted earlier. In 2017, we saw the big increase in applications, and we funded an additional 3 entities. So a majority of the money available, that $9.6 million, went to those providers who were engaging in getting teachers qualified to teach dual credit. It was $5 million roughly. And then this current cycle, we had a little bit of a decrease, but again, that correlates with the number of applications we received. We went down to $4.3 million, but again, 45% of the money. So in these last 2 cycles, we've seen that the focus of the grant, we're continuing to ensure that we are providing funding for those entities who are recruiting and retaining new STEM teachers. We have significant need around the state, so there are organizations who are working very hard, very well to fill those classrooms with eligible and qualified teachers. But we've also found the opportunity to ensure that with that HLC change and the requirements coming up in 2022, that teachers who are teaching dual credit, especially in STEM, are going to be able to take the classes and take the coursework necessary to be able to teach those classes. So a quick rundown, who are some of the entities who have received funding? This is just going based off this last cycle of 2019, who's applied and who received funding. So what they're doing, they're providing content and resources to assist the dual credit teachers to meet the HLC requirements by 2022. In this last cycle, we had 5 organizations. University of Southern Indiana, their New Experiences program for instructors of dual enrollment. That is math focused, so it's focused on making sure that math teachers, particularly in that region of the state, have the qualifications necessary to continue to teach math dual credit subject matter. Ball State University Foundation, the Hoosier STEM Academy. Many of you may have heard in the past of the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Foundation. They were in Indiana for several years. When they left Indiana after the 2015 grant cycle, we funded them, and then they moved to, they left the state of Indiana. Ball State University essentially picked up the ball there and continued on with that project. So that's a partnership between Ball State, IUPUI, IU, Purdue, and Valparaiso was a Valparaiso University was a prior participant, but they're no longer part of that program. What they're doing with the Hoosier STEM Academy is twofold. They are bringing in transition to teaching students, so essentially career changers. If somebody worked for Lilly or they worked for Cook or Roche, and they want to take that STEM background they have, and now they want to go into education, they're providing them with full tuition scholarships for 2 years of graduate study and then a year of teacher training. They're also providing funding for teachers who want to take dual credit coursework to be able to meet those HLC requirements. The other 3 entities we funded, and I'm going to ask them if they would like to speak just a little bit about what they're doing. The first one is Independent Colleges of Indiana, along with SELS. So they have administered the STEM Teach program. There's been 4 rounds of STEM Teach funding. Current funding is STEM Teach 4. And then the IU University Foundation, Growing Tomorrow STEM Teachers, which is focused in that southeast portion of the state, New Albany, that area, providing training for teachers within that area to meet the HLC requirements. And then the dual credit STEM pipeline. Before I let Mike Bean, who's here with IU, and Mary Ellen Hammer with ICI, one thing I wanted to just touch on is you see, especially with Indiana and then Ball State University, along with USI, you see the foundation listed as the applicant and the recipient of the grant. The law mandates that the entities who receive funding must be a domestic or foreign nonprofit registered with the Secretary of State. And so public universities do not meet that qualification themselves, but their foundations do. Therefore, the foundation applies for the grant, and the foundation is the entity that administers that funding on behalf of the university. Private universities are eligible to apply directly, and if they are selected, they can receive those funds, and we contract with that university directly. But going back, ICI and then IU Foundation. ICI has received the grant through all 4 rounds of funding. So they were an early participant in this space with providing those dual credit opportunities for teachers even before the HLC requirements changed. Mike Bean with IU Dual Credit STEM Pipeline, they received the grant in 2017 and again in 2019, and they're focusing on their ACP program. So Mike, Mary Ellen, let you go first, and I will step away and let you all talk about what's going on with your projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As Eugene mentioned, we are now in the 4th iteration of our STEM Teach program, and we've been very privileged to be able to serve teachers across the state through this program. In the first 2 iterations, we were able to serve K-12 teachers, not only secondary dual credit teachers, but last grant we focused exclusively on the dual credit certification issue, and this time primarily we're doing the same thing, about 3/4 of our grant, but we're fortunate enough now to be able to go back and serve other teachers, teachers who want professional development in the STEM areas, as well as teachers who are looking to add another STEM subject area to their certificate. We're kicking off in the spring semester. We're having meetings in the northern part of the state next week and the following week here in the Indy area to work with the colleges and universities about submitting their proposals, and we have already started reaching out to teachers as well. So one good thing about having it is that each time people are more familiar with our program, and we are able to reach out to teachers very quickly and get it up and running early in the grant cycle. So
It might be helpful for you to talk about the number of teachers who you have served.
I think among the 3, I don't have the exact numbers with me. I don't have them unduplicated, but I would say that we have probably served between 1,500 and 2,000 teachers over those 3 cycles.
Mike, you want to tell us a little bit about IU?
Sure, and thanks again for a second run of the grant. It's greatly appreciated. So the 2 programs noted on the slide are Dual Credit STEM Pipeline and the Growing Tomorrow STEM Teachers. The STEM Teacher, Growing Tomorrow STEM Teacher program is housed at, as you mentioned, IU Southeast. I'm really excited about that one actually, in particular because it's one of the ways in which IU is looking at dual credit in terms of one of the pieces in Grow Your Own Teacher strategies, and in this case focused on math and science teachers in the Southeast area, partnerships between local schools and the Southeast campus. It's become a little bit of a template that some of our other campuses have looked at in terms of how we might think about Grow Your Own program. So it's very small because it's very local, but at the same time, the impact is obviously, as we know, as school corporations are trying to find qualified teachers to plug in, especially in the STEM areas, it's a strong pipeline. For the other program, this is our second round. We have developed courses in the STEM areas, specifically in biology, chemistry, math, and we have some new courses coming online in computer science. So our ACP teachers, the dual credit program through IU, our teachers can participate in those courses. We've worked with over 250 teachers so far in the first iteration of the grant. I don't know how many new teachers we've added unduplicated this fall. I don't have that breakdown yet from my staff. But we've had a fantastic response from our teachers, and I do know that we have at least 9 STEM pipeline courses available this fall between those 3 disciplines. it's been a great partnership and really great.
Any questions about either one of these programs? Eugene, did you want to offer any other comments about?
If I'd like one point I just wanted to clarify between the two programs. The dual credit STEM pipeline, the last one you were talking about, that is specifically for teachers who are in the advanced college placement.
That's correct. So, right, yeah. So the second of the two, dual credit STEM pipeline, are the teachers who work through IU's dual credit program are eligible for those courses, and only teachers with a graduate degree. That's not true. Teachers who don't have a master's are still also eligible as well. So it's open to any teacher in our program that doesn't meet the Higher Learning Commission qualifications.
Right. But the first program, the one that is in the southeastern part of the state, that is open to anybody.
It's more broadly open. That's correct.
I have a quick question. Thank you for briefing us on your program. One thing going through my mind is after you provide the training, is there a longitudinal look as to what are the teachers doing after we train them? Are they providing the dual credit? Are they staying, hopefully, in the field? So that just was kind of going through my mind. If you could talk through any longitudinal tracking that you do of teachers following completion, that would be helpful.
We, with our last grant, because of course the first few times we got the grant, we didn't know if the money would continue to be available or if we would be recipients, but we did use and include in our proposal a teacher portal, an online registration portal, which is allowing us to track the teachers, how many courses they take in what subject areas, and then to be able to reach out to them to continue on. We also made as part of our agreement with the teachers this time that they would promise that they would continue to teach in Indiana and continue to teach dual credit. We have not gotten enough people, I think, through the 18 credits, because that's only been the last 2 cycles. We have quite a few now through it. Now we can go back and make sure that those people are where we think they are. Yes, we'll do that. And we have a way to do it now.
Thank you.
And for our engagement, because we were only involved in the last round, so we don't have much of a long look back or between fall 2017 and today. What we do know, and I think this is the case for both of the programs we've been talking about, teachers are only eligible if they're currently teaching dual credit for us, for our programs. So there is a one-to-one relationship between the funding, in this case, going to support teachers up educating themselves to actual dual credit instruction. It's happening. That's how it's one of the eligibility criteria. But again, this is only our beginning of our second round, so not much longitudinal data. I do know that our program in general has an attrition rate each year of about 10 to 11%. And I don't have any indicator that this population would fall outside that general turnover rate.
Our teachers are current dual credit teachers as well, and if they aren't current dual credit teachers, their principal has to endorse them saying that they are going to be moved into a dual credit area for teaching and that they need this training.
Basically, following up on Ken's question, so is there any commitment, or maybe it's Katie's question, any commitment afterwards that they're going to stay in the field teaching those courses for a period of time? I mean, especially when we're giving them free education. I think of Next Generation Future Educators, for instance, where we require them to teach in an Indiana school for 5 years. Is there any type of requirement in your programs to say? I mean, they may currently be, but there's no requirement to say.
We ask for that commitment, but in terms of enforcing it, I'm not quite sure how we go about that.
Same with us. We have discussed it, and I believe it was actually in a conversation, if not in one of these meetings several years ago, but something similar, where the frustration in basically how to hold, in a humane way, how to hold the schools and teachers accountable for that. We didn't know that we had a good model for that. It is, it is absolutely something we thought about and are not, we haven't stopped caring about, but we're paying attention to. Just again, as we've just had one iteration, we don't really have too much longitudinal data to suggest it's a problem with teachers completing this and then moving out. It's something we are paying attention to.
I don't know that the question is moving out of state as much as moving from a district then to another district. He doesn't pay what I pay, and we're neighbors, and guess what?
And I'm going to echo those same things that we're seeing in the region, is that some districts have the capability to offer additional funds on top of a higher salary to poach a teacher from a district. So, especially in high demand areas.
Well, and I wouldn't care as policy, as long as they're staying in the field. I mean, I understand the issue of moving around, but, you know, and I understand the complexity. I don't know if I would, what was the word used, humanely?
Humane.
I mean, the next generation future educators, and I think the commission's required to kind of keep that enforced and make sure that we are getting return on investment. So it just to me is something we need to be cognizant. Now, if the data doesn't support that it's necessary, then it's not something to move forward. But I just think in terms of making sure, kind of following on Katie's question.
Eugene, you might speak to what kind of metrics we require for either first-time awardees or those who return in terms of the success of their programs. What do we ask for from them?
So in each of the reports, we ask for, we ask for a high-level summary of what's going on with the project period, so the 6 months between the prior report and the current report. We ask for a listing of the participants, if they can provide those. So if the entity can provide a listing of those participants, where they're teaching at, what classes or coursework they're taking, and then what the outcome is of that. So again, to Mike's point, with a lot of the, especially with us getting into the dual credit space within 2015, a lot of that information, there are people who are still, it's not as neat as we may want it to be. So teachers sometimes get the option, depending on what qualifications they have. Some of them are taking a full coursework to get a graduate degree. Some are taking 3 credit hours every semester just so they can get up to the 18 credit hours they need before the HLC requirements kick in. So a lot of it's not lockstep in terms of each program allows the teacher and the participant to kind of do things at their pace, which means some of that data may not be as clean as being able to say, you know, this person was in this district for this long and now they met what they need. I think as we continue to get these reporting requirements and hopefully that the General Assembly continues to fund this initiative, that data will become a lot cleaner because we'll be able to track, especially with dual credit, who got funding, what their outcomes were, but that's going to take probably another cycle to really start to see that. One thing I'll also mention to Representative Bain's question, there are a lot of programs, and this is not just not the participants around the table, but entities who are giving some of the STEM grants for dual credit for recruitment. So they're giving scholarships and funds to students who are in schools of education. Two that stick out to me are Purdue and the University of Evansville, and they do have clawback requirements. Typically, when the undergraduate programs are doing this grant, they're doing 2 things. And I think the Yugi is one, but definitely Purdue, where they have their students of education. They're taking classes in the same classes that the science majors are taking. So that's part of their program, is if you are majoring in biology and this student is majoring in secondary education and they're science focused, they're taking those same classes. But their clawback is, for the dollars they get, they have to teach at least 3 years in a Indiana school district, or the money goes back to the university. They have those students sign essentially, I don't want to say promissory note, I don't want to say that incorrectly, but they have them sign an agreement to say that they will meet the conditions in terms of getting either this scholarship, or in Purdue's case, it's actually a forgivable loan. So
I'm a little curious on the other end of it is when we talk about, and back to Tom and Bob's conversation about where they go afterwards, I'm not so concerned about that as I'm concerned about the pool to begin with. How are we getting them in there? And I'm just curious, those students that are currently in your programs, why are they there? Are they there because they're being incentivized, because they just came across it in some way? So I don't know if we're asking for that feedback of why are they in the program in the first place, because I know we incentivize our staff to do it, so it feels intentional, but is that the case across the board, or, and if that is the case, then maybe we should do that across the state, or find a way to do that more intentionally, so we can grow the pool, so it doesn't matter if they go to Tom's school or my school after they're finished.
Each proposal has the ambiguity to kind of to form it how they think is going to work best for their for the population they're looking to serve. So I know in Mary Ellen's case that her programs, when they come together, there are some of them that provide incentives. It may be the tuition, the book stipend, and then there may be a stipend to complete the coursework. I would say, off the top of my head, the majority of those who are providing the trainings for the dual credit for STEM for in-service teachers do provide some sort of incentive. Nothing outrageous, but $100, $250 for completing that particular course or the coursework necessary. And that seems to be something that all of those entities who are servicing the in-service teachers, if they weren't doing it in the 2015 cycle, by the time they came back around or applying for 2017 and 2019, that was something that they put as part of their proposal as to what they will provide to their teachers. Sometimes, again, at $10 million is what's in the budget bill. 9.6 is what we end up funding. So people have to scale back sometimes their initial proposals, but I will say the incentives normally stay. They may have to dial it down. They may be dialed down a little bit, but that seems to be standard operating procedure at this point with the in-service providers, is to provide some sort of incentive for those teachers taking coursework.
Janet, I know you came in a little bit late, so we've heard both from IU and ICI. Are there any comments that you'd like to make about the process?
I think to answer a little bit more about Jason's question here, we realize that we aren't finding everybody that's out there. And so one of the things we're going to try this year is to do some better marketing in terms of the program. However, we've also learned that there are teachers who don't want to do it. You know, they might be selected or asked by their school district, but they're either, family life or after school obligations or close to retirement, and they don't want to take part in that. So I think we've got some good options. It's just, can we talk people into this in some way?
I want to offer this as well too, and this is I'll use ICI and SEL as an example of how a lot of the entities have shifted, especially again if they're continuing within the grant, that they shifted their models from a lot of face-to-face classwork to online. And the feedback that we've gotten in the majority of the reports are that teachers are finding it more beneficial if the course offerings are online compared to having to go in person. That could be some regions, depending on their, I'll use IU Southeast as an example. Their School of Education, they are very much in touch with the school corporations in that service district. So they can feel out whether those teachers are willing to come in class, they want in person. Some people do better with the traditional classroom model, but they're offering both ends too. They're offering the online opportunity for those folks who can't get into the classroom. And ICI, SEL, and other providers have also moved to realize that providing as much as they can to provide those course offerings online is going to be something that the educators are going to find beneficial, and they're more likely to sign up for the coursework that they need. So, just anecdotal.
Any more questions or anything else you want to cover, Eugene?
No, anything else, Commissioner? If anybody has any questions, please feel free to, I'll be available after the meeting. So thank you very much.
One question along the lines of sort of how long teachers may be staying around teaching in the field. Do you have any data on the age of the teachers who are participating? Ideally, it would be nice if we were reaching the younger teachers who might be...
You do mean young, anything under 60.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It is a relative term, that's for sure.
We do have that. We have years of experience as well as where in the state they're located. And Elkhart County is our biggest user. partially because I think sales presence, we're up there working on the Lilly counseling grant with all 7 districts, so we talk about this to a lot of folks, and so they get involved with it. And then our second most county, I believe, is Marion. So
You would assume that the people most motivated would be those who think they're going to be in the classroom for a while, and not those that are going to be exiting within 5 years. But to the degree that we can keep track of, keep track of that kind of data,
Yes.
I think it will be important.
we've got it
us.
for all 3 iterations we've done so far, and there are a few folks in the 55 plus range, and they don't have any intention of retiring at 62 or whatever. So
That's great.
yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to take just a second. Todd Best has tried to call in, and I cut him off earlier, so we were waiting until this was over so we could call him back again, and then we'll move to, Ken is going to talk a little bit recently about some approvals at our commission meeting and some new programs that we think are helpful in this regard as well. We'll do just a brief overview of that.
This is a lot of pressure.
He hung up.
I did, I just did.
Well, as I said earlier today, technology is great until it isn't. All right, we're going to move on then, and we'll see if we can get him on the line here in a minute if he wants to try to. But we're going to talk about some approvals.
And this is more FYI, and Michael may want to add to my comments after I'm finished, but just in the spirit of informing everyone of recent actions, the commission met last week down in Jasper, and there were 5 Master in Arts of Teaching programs that were on the agenda for approval from Indiana University. Well, a couple of things that are interesting about these programs. First of all, they at least they all pretty much address areas in which we have a lot of dual credit teachers teaching and who need credentialing opportunities. So the 5 areas in which these MAT programs were approved for were biology, chemistry, mathematics, history, and political science. So obviously, especially the biology, chemistry, and math are right in the ballpark in terms of STEM programs. There are a lot of students who take government courses, and political science certainly would address that, as is the case with history courses. What is interesting about these programs is that they are all online and that they are all collaborative, something that the Commission likes to see in programs. So in all 5 of these areas, all regional campuses are participating. And in 4 of the areas, the Bloomington campus is also contributing faculty and courses. And in the 5th area, IUPUI participates as well. So it's a cost-effective way of delivering distance education opportunities. And per Eugene's point earlier, a lot of teachers really prefer that online delivery mode. In addition to that, if you have multiple campuses contributing, you're pretty sure that you'll be able to deliver the coursework that's needed in a particular sequence, so that students can actually complete the program within their own time frame. The only other thing I'd say is that just in terms of the number of graduates that are projected, so when these programs are fully ramped up, the biology program is projected to graduate 48 students per year, chemistry 56, history 56, math 60, and political science 80. Another thing I'd note is that remember that the Higher Learning Commission's faculty qualifications policy doesn't just apply to dual credit instructors, it applies to instructors across the board. So someone who is teaching at Ivy Tech, for example, in a liberal arts area would need to have a master's degree and either in the discipline or a master's degree in another discipline with 18 graduate hours in the discipline in the course that they're teaching. So this would also help in terms of providing opportunities for faculty who are teaching on campuses as well. Mike, do you want to add anything to that?
A couple things. First, I want to thank the Commission for doing the great work of getting these MATs looked at and reviewed, so thank you so much. I would add that you don't see English on the list because we already had a collaborative online degree in Masters in English that teachers find very, very compelling. That also includes a track as an option in communication, which is great for our public speaking / speech teachers. So it's not that we don't care about our English teachers, we care about them so much we work with them first, I suppose. So I wanted to mention that so we're not missing that space. Good news is that we're also now going to move forward with a collaborative approach in adding a Spanish track and a computer science track. So we should see those coming too. And then additionally, the faculty in French and German have also started offering online graduate courses. So when we add computer science and Spanish, this list really represents 88+% of the dual credit courses that when we looked at that grid of the gaps in where teachers were and who needed to be educated, we're really in the almost hitting 90% of coverage in terms of the proportionality on that grid. So I feel like we're probably as pretty good there as we can get on coverage. The last thing I would add, just so you folks know, is these MATs and the 18 hours in the content embedded in them are really designed to focus primarily content, theory, and history of the discipline specific to the first courses taught in these disciplines, really to the courses that are delivered through dual credit. These aren't, an MAT in history isn't, about esoteric, French history in 1300. It's really focused on making sure folks are prepared to teach the survey, the intro to U.S. history surveys on college campuses or through dual credits. So they're very focused on the courses we're concerned with, which I think is the strength of the design, and I appreciate the faculty's focus there. Thanks.
By the way, I made reference to the number of dual credit teachers in different disciplines, and you may remember this chart that was passed out at the last meeting. Terry Lambert, who really does amazing work here in pulling all this data together, should have an update before our next meeting on October 21st.
Definitely, yes.
Right. So there's an enormous amount of effort that goes into these charts. We've produced them now 3 years in a row, so this will be the 4th iteration. Of course, we're all very anxious to take a look at the new data and to see the extent to which we may have made some progress.
Okay, I think we're going to move on and really get to the crux of why the legislature wanted us to come back together again, which is really look at not only how we're doing, but what we think we could be doing in terms of making recommendations to step this up even more. We provided to you a document, which we can't really figure out exactly when this document, the one that's titled The Top Teacher Credentialing Potential Solutions for Further Consideration. This is an older document. It may go back as far as 2016 even, I think. But not surprisingly, there are only so many new ideas that you can come up with. So I think this is still a fairly comprehensive list of some of the things that we could be looking at. And then also, Janet has provided another document with ideas for solutions for teacher credentialing. So we're I'm gonna turn this over to Ken. This is one we really, we only meet one more time. So we need to be able to really be circling around some of these ideas and recommendations that we're making. Obviously, we're going to continue the things that we're doing because they're having an impact. But we remain concerned that 2022 will be here before you know it, and we still aren't going to be where we need to be in totality, especially in some areas, both geographical areas and areas of study as well. So with that, Ken, why don't you look at the first document with us, and I want this to be a discussion, so it shouldn't just be Ken presenting ideas, it should be your reaction to those ideas, what you think looks good, and then, I don't know, Janet, whether some of these things can be incorporated in one discussion or whether it's a separate discussion, but at the end of the day, we're having a discussion now about other ways in which we can deal with the shortage issue of qualified dual credit teachers, and anything's on the table.
So the first document that the Commissioner referenced, the one from 2016, it groups ideas in three different areas. So the first is for post-secondary education, higher education institutions. The second is for schools and the school districts, corporations, and the last is for state agencies, the legislature, state policy. So maybe we can just take these one by one. The first area, higher education, 1, 3, and 4 are pretty much deal with the same point, which is to provide opportunities for the teachers, especially in STEM areas, but not only in STEM areas, to become fully qualified to meet the HLC faculty qualifications. So that would be really what we've been talking about for the first two agenda items this afternoon. And I would also say that, so we're dealing with master's degrees as well as certificates for someone who has a master's degree but needs 18 graduate hours in the discipline in which they are teaching. So there's a certificate program that is available. And I think the opportunities for teachers to get the certificate if they have a master's degree or to get that master's degree, there are a lot of those since this list was put together back in 2016. So I think we made an awful lot of progress there, both in terms of availability as well as financial support for teachers to pursue those programs. Item number 3 on the list deals with what is sometimes called the faculty on loan approach. So this would involve a faculty member from a campus who would go to the high school in order to teach the dual credit course. So faculty on loan seems to be the appropriate way to describe that particular activity.
Do we have any idea how much of this is taking place right now? We know there are some of this out there.
Right. Well, I know Ivy Tech had used this particular model. Laura, I don't know if you...
Yes, we do. We use it a lot in the Terre Haute area, but only I think that there's something that people don't always see is that sometimes this can affect the full-time status of teachers teaching at the high school. So, for instance, we had a communications teacher through ISU who was going to be teaching Com 101, and she was told she couldn't this year. So all the students withdrew from her class, and we're doing a professor on loan model with those kids, but she's short one period now. So she's not technically a full-time teacher.
So piggybacking off of
They added something to her schedule, but that's.
yeah, this is in my mind such an opportunity in our state. There are districts who are working hard to figure this out, the blending of the K-12 and post-secondary space. And so when a K-12 school district has a challenge finding a physics teacher, calling up the local Vincennes, Ivy Tech, IU, post-secondary, how might we work together? So I think what Laura is sharing is what we hear a lot statewide, which is here's the barrier, but this is a real opportunity to further blend these spaces. We have to figure this out.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So are you saying that the high school teacher wouldn't have had a full load to teach?
Exactly.
And so...
Wouldn't have been considered full-time.
So there was a shortage though. They had a shortage of dual credit, so
Right.
they didn't have enough people to qualify.
Yes, that is
So
correct.
any thoughts about that? That's a real conundrum. I don't know how you deal with that because it's obviously part of the contracts, I would assume.
Right. They were able to, they split an English 12 class, which was great for the students because there was about 24 students, so 12 went into one room and 12 went into another room, and that's
fiscal issues. So one of the things that you get into when you start sharing faculty is at the institutions of higher education is how does that count within workload? Faculty in higher education may have selected the pathway into higher education to not be a high school teacher, and or that's not what they wanted to do. So there may be some pushback from faculty, and then where do those cross boundaries? So who pays for a quarter of a faculty workload or salary? Who pays for a teacher's salary, vice versa, if that teacher comes to the institution of higher education? How does that count in his or her workload? How does that work in terms of evaluations of performance? I can think of a lot of reasons why this is something that would be very difficult to do. Not that it can't be done, but that it would be difficult to do because there are lots of moving pieces with lots of different public institutions.
Well, it seemed to me, one, that if a faculty member did not want to teach dual credit, there would be no way in which they'd be required to do so. So I think that we could take off the table. But the blended funding sources, I mean, I don't know, are any of your institutions making faculty teach dual credit? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, our faculty don't teach dual credit, so.
Right.
I think there's a lot of adjuncts being hired to do this. One of the things that we notice, though, sometimes the high school teacher that does complete the credentialing gets hired away by the higher ed, and so then the school districts, oops, there we go again, needing some teachers to fill that, unless they turn around and use them as the professor on loan.
So what we need to do in this regard is identify where it's being used well and figure out what the obstacles are and see if we can tackle some of those. I mean, I was thinking about the situation that you described, and it would seem to me that if you had a couple school districts where they had a shortage in an area, they could share that and not get into the space of the teacher who then would, the high school teacher. So, I mean, some of those things I think we just need to think about in a new way. Obviously, there are complications, and this is a complex space, and it's going to be difficult to figure it out. But for the, and this isn't going to be the answer for every place, for everything. It's one of the options that could be used in some places where it seems to work. So it would be helpful for us to have those who are here representing both K-12 and higher ed help us identify what the funding challenges are, and any models where you see this is being implemented in a way that seems to be working fairly smoothly. And maybe there is something in our recommendations that we could offer in this regard, understanding that both the high school and higher ed are going to have their own, they're going to be in control of how they do it. So, any other thoughts about that particular one? Well, we need to sort of figure out if we can, I don't know, Ken, if we can figure this out, or Terry, you know, where this is being used. I don't know if we could do some sort of a survey with, to actually reach out and try to figure out who is actually doing this now and what they are, what keeps them from either doing it more or would a word of caution from them. So we'll try to do that part if you guys will help us think through models that seem to work. What else is down here, Ken?
Question?
Oh.
No,
Yes, John.
we have a number of schools who do partner with IDTech with the teacher on loan, but it's basically subject to availability of staff in particular regions. In certain campuses, there's more availability than others.
You mean where there is a need, and so they actually would take advantage of it?
Well, where IDTech has the staffing availability to provide that teacher on loan. Some regional campuses, there may be more availability than others.
But you also obviously have a need at the high school level.
Right.
That you can't meet the requirements there. So, right.
Well, the last potential solution on this, in this section, deals with technology, distance education. And here there are really a couple of different potential approaches. One would simply be that the college faculty member teaches the course through distance ed, and it's specifically geared to dual credit students at our high schools. Sort of another variation might be that the course is being offered via distance education, but it wouldn't be taught exclusively to high school students, but high school students might be permitted to enroll in that particular section. And then the sort of the last variation of that really kind of blends into the next category of potential solutions, in which we're really talking about a school corporation that would have one of their faculty members teach a course online, and to the extent, and sort of there's another little variation, in addition to the providing opportunities, if we're in a multi-school, high school corporation, could allow students from other high schools, other districts, other corporations to participate as well. So there, it's still the classic dual credit model, because you're having a high school teacher who is teaching the course, but it extends to multiple high schools. So anyway, that's the technology.
So would it make sense to consider this as like high schools form and districts forming, especially smaller ones in the rural communities? I could see creating consortia where they, maybe in this district they have a physics teacher, and in this district they have a history teacher, and that they collaborate and allow working with institutions of higher ed, Ivy Tech, us, IU, whomever, to channel the course, so where this person, the credits would run through. And I think that could be something that would be very helpful, especially to the smaller rural districts that don't have the larger.
See Jason nodding his head.
Yeah, I thought, did Vincennes have a model?
I was going to say, we, Vincennes have done something like that. We have what we call HELPS. I don't know what that stands for, if you remember. We have a couple different models that we've done. One model in particular where the students are in a dedicated time for their course. They're in the course, taking a distance ed. It is instructed online by the instructor, but in class there is either a paraprofessional, or the better model that I've seen is where it's an instructor who maybe they don't have the credentials but have the background. So maybe it's a psych course and the instructor is not credentialed in psych, but they have that teacher license that have the psych background, and they're able to help facilitate the course, because we know it's a struggle throwing high school students in an online course and expect them to be successful without support. So that's been very helpful. Another model that we've tried, we've kind of put it on hold a little bit, in which we've had instructors or had instructors that are credentialed from one of our institutions as a teacher that's credentialed in a particular area. Maybe they're overseeing it for another school district, they're teaching it online, but then there's the teacher from the other school district that's not credentialed. They're maybe planning to go for their credentials, and they oversee the physical classroom. And we've kind of put that one a little bit on hold until we kind of work out the process, but it's kind of along the lines of what you're saying, kind of developing a consortium.
So in the model you just described, the faculty member of record would be the VU faculty member.
Or it could be a teacher from another school district that's credentialed through VU that's overseeing it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a VU person on campus. It could be, as long as they're credentialed through VU or through whatever school.
Well, I know in previous discussions, actually, we have talked about a model in which the faculty member on the college campus may turn out to be the faculty member of record, but there's sort of it's a blended approach in which the high school teachers are doing sort of part of the teaching as well. That may be tricky to sort of describe, and it's not. It would be a model that we probably need to look at pretty carefully. But
sure.
Is that being tried?
That's exactly the model that we were, but it wasn't necessarily the person on campus. It was the model that we tried was someone from one of our other districts that was credentialed for, I believe it was in Spanish. She taught for a particular early college high school for us. She was credentialed. She was the person on record, and then the person in the classroom did some of the teaching while they were also working towards their credentials, or planning to work towards.
But that's a high school credential teacher.
Correct.
Who is then teaching students in another school
Correct.
where the faculty member is not.
Yes, that is correct.
And in that case, the credential teacher would be the teacher of record.
Yes, that is correct, yes.
Nicole, didn't, I remember seeing that helps model at Lawrenceburg and Center Grove, and they worked really well.
Yes.
But I thought one of the things for whoever the faculty person was on record, that they were in charge of grading the exams
Yes,
and assigning.
that is correct. They were in charge of the whole entire course, facilitating everything through and working closely with that classroom facilitator or peer professional.
Right, so the limitation of that model is it doesn't really get away from the load issue. If you have 4 schools that need something and there's 30 students at each school, you're still doing 120 students. Because that faculty member has to get in and do the grading and stuff.
IBTech also has the ICAP model, which is similar to having the course taught online and then having a proctor or another high school teacher in the classroom watching the students and helping them with
And who is teaching the course as well?
an IBTech instructor would be teaching the course, and then in the high school classrooms, a moderator or a proctor would be watching students, making sure that they're staying on track.
Is that a well-developed model?
It's not, I know that we've used it and kind of went away from it a little bit, but I think that it's coming back now. I have some students that are doing an accounting class similar to that, and accounting is not one of the ICAP classes, but we used that as a model. So we have an instructor who is not credentialed to teach accounting, but he worked in a business for 15 years doing the books. So he's able to just keep the kids on track and make sure that they are following along time management skills and questions.
Janet, could you talk about any of the others on this page that we may have hit on, or others that are, see if there's some interest in the target group for us to explore?
Sure. One of the second bullet down is something that Ohio has had going for some time. It was formed through the Ohio Appalachian Collaborative, which is a collaborative of rural schools. They realized that it's like the whole eastern third of the state would be termed their Appalachian area, but they realized that dual credit was not being taken in those rural districts because they could not get to a university or could not get their teachers' credentials. So what was done by the collaborative is they basically put out an RFP to the universities in the state and said, we need one university to be in charge of like the Master of Arts in English, one in charge of math, partially because they figured that there weren't enough teachers for all the universities to offer all the different Masters of Arts in teaching, and so nobody would have enough students attending to make a graduate program worthwhile. So that's what they did. They had one university doing English, one math, etc. And then they provided tuition free to the teachers as well as books, etc. And it was mostly done online.
And so the tuition was covered by the state?
Yes, or by this collaborative, which it was.
The collaborative was funded by the state?
No, it's part of Battelle for Kids. And Battelle got grants for this. And they've been doing this for quite a few years. I've seen their presentations, and they have wonderful professional development for the teachers, not just the courses, but do things in the summer and bring those teachers together to meet with the professors that are teaching in the subject area, et cetera. So it's quite and they've seen tremendous growth in dual credit in all of those rural districts, as well as seen college going rates go up tremendously.
So the difference between that and anything that we're doing is the differential by the institute, that you basically aren't doing it all at one institution is specializing.
Right. So I know, just speaking from working at University of Indianapolis, they have strong interest in forming a lot of graduate programs, but can't make it go if there are only 6 people in a cohort, that kind of thing. I think that's true for many universities, that's a tough one to do. And so that's what is exciting for you guys to start the MAT programs, because somebody needs to do those. So, but I think that the key is to have the professional development besides the courses as well. So that was one idea. At the time that this was written, almost 3 years ago, that was after the first iteration of the grants from the STEM Teacher Recruitment Grant, and we had started STEM Teach, so that's why we were saying, do more of that, and we've got plenty of that going. Fee waivers and discounts, I think some of the universities are already doing that across the state. Those things are needed. Sometimes cohort models work well. I know it's worked well in the ACP program, but teachers tend to like to have others to talk to. We have found, especially math teachers, they're just going, oh my gosh, this is way too hard, but they need each other kind of to problem solve and work together on things. Kind of did the next one.
What is credit for credit?
Oh, Montana started this, and this was legislatively funded. This was kind of a cool deal where they too were trying to get their teachers to become credentialed for dual credit instruction, and it, again, saw some reluctance. So they set up this 3-for-3 program, or credit for credit, where if a teacher takes a 3-credit graduate course, they receive a voucher for someone else, their family, their teacher, colleague, whatever, to also be able to take a tuition-free course. And it helped build the numbers there too. Mike, do you remember hearing about that at NASEP? Because
I thought I heard it the opposite way. If a teacher taught a 3-credit-hour course, did they know? Is it?
I thought it was they took it too, and it might be both actually.
Yeah.
So
there is, maybe it's not Montana, but another state does have a
one.
version of that where the teacher teaches 3 credits, and then they have sort of a bank
You're
of 3
right.
credits they can
You're right.
give to someone else. So it may not be Montana.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's managed through the state, so they can go to any institution, or is the bank available to a particular institution? But I'm
It's a
talking
state.
Montana.
In Montana, it's a state.
It's a Board of Regents state, so it's probably easier for them to do that.
The public institutions, I think, yeah. And I think we've covered most of the other ones there on the higher ed. So there's a lot of similarity between these two documents.
So what are we not thinking about? I mean, is there anything that seems?
I'm thinking about a year from now, or 2 years from now, when we are looking at numbers of teachers who have, we've made remedial efforts to try and get folks through, and we're saying it's 22, on the calendar, and we need to have more in place. Are there any? You said, I wrote it down. Anything is on the table. We're talking about dual credit for students in our high schools to college. Is there any type of dual credit for teachers to take a class and not get a class for their children, but get credit for the preceding class or whatever, if they successfully pass something 301, do they get credit for 201 in that regard?
Sort of like you used to do testing out of certain, you could test out a certain number of hours of something if you showed competency.
Yeah, and I don't want to cheapen the experience or whatever, but I also spent 9 years in Denver, Indiana, and Denver, Indiana doesn't even have a gas station, and there were teachers who taught upper level courses who were the same person taught several in science and math because they were dual licensed, and the person I'm thinking of, 2 different ones have retired now, and what you do to fill those voids, in very rural areas in the state, those teachers will be a hot commodity, and if there is incentive money someplace else, they may be, like rural Indiana right now, enrollment's diminishing in
We need to
So-
find some way to incent the system so that we're not constantly in the situation we're in now where we're trying to piece something together, but that in fact, we're building a system, a pipeline that is addressing this issue, and you know, perhaps there needs to be at least a recommendation of something to address not only the current gap, but what are we doing to change that so we don't continue to perpetuate the gaps?
Yeah.
And that's where my mind is going, Commissioner Lovers, and I'm gonna zoom out real quick. It sounds like we're solving for a couple of questions. How to skill teachers up for credentialing requirements. Going to one part A, what Jason said earlier, what is the incentive on the front end? And 1B, are we serving the right individuals? Are we getting to IPS? Are we getting to, right? Are we serving the right teachers? 1C would be, what is the return on investment? That longitudinal conversation of what we're doing now. And then that second is what you asked earlier. What are the solutions to the present models that are already happening in the state? And to that, there are a couple pieces there, right? What is happening? What is the opportunity there? What are the barriers there? Because we can always list all the barriers. And how do we overcome those barriers? And then what are the funding pieces? So my mind is going to taking these two documents, which I really appreciate, flushing them out based around those two questions, and really digging into what is the real problem at its core.
Remind me again the two questions. What are the two questions?
Well, I'll write it down for you later.
All right.
Question one is the overall question: how do we skill teachers up for dual credentialing requirements?
All right.
And I think the other question that's really floating around here is all of us realize that that could be part of the solution, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that we have some districts in our state presently making this work today. And if you travel around the state or talk to colleagues, a lot of their questions are, well, how are you all doing that? What is, so I think that we're missing as a state right now this a list of these models and then a communication strategy to deliver. Our communication strategy right now is sell. It's our higher education folks who are doing their best. But how do we, I think we could deliver as recommendations a really nice, here are some things that are working. Yes, you're gonna have this barrier hit you, and yes, there's gonna be a funding challenge. But here's solutions there. Because if we don't hit it from the two-prong approach, if we only focus on how to skill teachers up, I think your point, Tom, gosh, we're gonna be sitting here in 2022.
My guess about that pool that currently is in there is it's districts that are making it a priority. And my question would be, how many districts are making it a priority right now?
Do you just your community, local community support this? Does it come up through your community development or?
It does. The Community Foundation is really behind educational attainment, but we're an early college endorsed by CEL, and so it's a priority. It's in our lifeblood. It's what we do, and so it's important to us to incentivize. I look at these incentives for K-12. We do them all. Well, we do them all because we're an early college because it's a priority. My question back to those current pool of teachers that are doing this: are they coming from early colleges? Are they coming from districts that are incentivizing this? And to Tom's point, it does worry me down the road. I'm going to incentivize and have a wonderful team at Wabash High School, and then when 2022 rolls around, everybody else is going to want that wonderful team. So maybe I shouldn't worry about that.
Well,
yeah. Not for those people.
I'm, hearing what Tom said, I don't see this as a solution, maybe it isn't an opportunity, but is there any way that we can demonstrate mastery without necessarily taking a college course? Are there some competencies?
we tried this, and we should be able to. Here we are talking about prior learning assessments and everything else, but we can't figure out a way to do
Well,
this because I don't think HLC is going to let us.
Well, I find find that hard. It depends on the course by course basis, I would assume. I was telling my college yesterday, and one of our students wanted to waive a course that was undergraduate, but she required them to provide her, a list of things, and she was able to waive. Now, she told the student, you didn't provide adequate background, so I need more information, but she was able to waive that.
Well, they're not gonna back down from the masters or.
Well, I'm not saying that, but I'm
the
saying,
question
can
is,
you get
was there some way to
competency
show,
for,
right,
yeah,
and
for
actually get
a
credit?
master's level course? Can you demonstrate, rather than have them have to pay for it, and have something that they've already really had, the competency to be able to do it? It's just like we're paying for something that they probably have the knowledge to do.
Would it be better to actually know versus anecdotally think that that is the case?
Well,
I guess I'm not against competency-based education at all, but I think it misses nuances for sure of understanding, and someone may believe that they possess the knowledge, skills, and don't forget dispositions related to that area, and they may be able to demonstrate some of that. I don't know how. I don't know. I don't know that my interactions with classroom teachers haven't been, oh, I already know this stuff.
Well, I'm saying on a specific course, like, say I'm taking a statistics course, and I taught something very similar to this for years. I'm take a master's level course now, but teaching exactly the same thing that they've been teaching. I don't know why, like I said, this colleague of mine made this student provide to her demonstration that she had mastered the concepts that were necessary for that course. So rather than that student having to invest in that course and the time and the resources, she was given credit for it. I don't know why HLC would care. They let WGU Indiana is accredited by HLC, isn't it? And they have their competency-based model. So they're using that model all the time. Now they're using it undergraduate, but I don't know why that's not something we're at least
They do for
considering.
masters too,
I know they get masters too, so I don't know why we aren't looking at that as an option that is.
Well, we had this discussion, and we went down a rabbit's hole somehow, so maybe we need to try to come back up again and figure out if there's some way to
in
have.
fairness-
Mike, can you speak to what Bob is saying? And is there,
I want to make sure.
Well, no, let me finish. In fairness, I think, and I work for higher ed, I don't think higher ed likes to do that because that's a loss of revenue. And I'm not saying it's necessarily anybody at this table, but traditionally, competency-based is looked upon as not necessarily the same quality it would be if you were in a classroom setting. But to me, like I say, WGU it's very highly ranked, very highly rated, and they are competency-based model. And I think in the future, we're going to be moving a lot of our adults are going to be moving into competency-based education as opposed to this traditional, time in a seat.
well, it really comes down to how HLC will interpret this. So,
But it's a little bit bigger than that, though. Jumping, sorry. When we did take a look at this, I know all the post-secondaries who work with our teachers looked at tested experience opportunities, if there were other courses that could count for something. And we explored that as much as our faculty department folks would tolerate us coming back to them and chipping away, right? That in a current scenario where a teacher has a master's degree, let's say, and they just need 18 hours in chemistry, and this person was a chemist at Lilly for 7 years, can we kind of let the last 6 hours kind of be accounted for by this experience for her? Possibly. But then when we move into this, and I think Tom's heading there, this group of teachers who need to complete master's degrees and programs, that's when the post-secondaries and their master's degree programs have been approved by the commission of the HLC, et cetera. Those, the rules guiding the kind of course taking and how those sorts of things count. My point is I think we're unpacking there more than just a course you're asking programs to jump out of the course program and progress that they've gotten approval for the HLC that makes that master's degree a master's degree. So I think it's a little bit deeper than.
I don't know that I'm asking that. I'm saying that, you know, in an 18-hour period requirement, if are there 6 credit hours that they could technically test out of?
Sure.
I'm not saying you have to rewrite your program. I'm saying, you know, there ought to be classes that you can demonstrate that you've got mastery on and not have to take the course, save the money, save the time.
And why wouldn't we run down that rabbit hole just to make sure, right? Why wouldn't we capture it on our recommendations?
The testing experience.
Yeah, we might not have the answer by November 1st when it's due, but at least we as a commission have captured it and can run down that together to
The
determine
programs
the
have, I
answers.
believe, and this is something Terry can chime in. We've talked about the programs. I know Vincennes, Ivy Tech, all of us at this table have done this, and there are some courses definitely that we can give a tested experience from. That it isn't very many. It's 1 or 2. It really is.
What would be some examples of?
So, for instance, in a foreign language, in a world language, there
Okay.
could be a national international exam score that would correspond to what we would exempt our graduate students from having to take. So, for instance, if in our graduate program they got score X, they wouldn't need to take this first graduate course. That could be something.
And so that would be a fantastic area to know about as a school district, because my mind is immediately going to, within an STGEC, that matters. And school districts, I know are contacting higher ed to determine how they might continue to teach dual credit in a foreign language. So that's a great example that would matter, that if we capture that on the recommendations, it would be nice, again, that communication strategy to have it, to hand straight to higher ed, to hand straight to superintendents or what have you, so we're all on the same page there.
We need a graduate equivalent of CLEP.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I wonder, is there any way that, and maybe this has been done, and I'm not aware of it, but has WGU really been, have we spent any time driving down with WGU to find out how they, I mean, they're accredited, HLC, how are they doing it?
Well, let me say a couple things here. One is just on the tested experience part. When Terry, you put the data together last year, there were less than 2% of the teachers who were teaching dual credit who were able to do that based on tested experience. So it was only 52, and we had a total of.
How did we determine how they could do it on testing?
Well, that's up to the individual institutions, and while my own view is that I think HLC, while they're very careful about this, it would be hard to put if an institution really made a strong case for, let's say, somebody who was teaching a world language, and by the way, there were only 4 teachers in Spanish who were able to teach based on tested experience. And you wonder whether it wouldn't be legitimate to at least ramp that number up a little bit more based on the one's experience. So I don't think that's ever going to be a huge number, but on the other hand, 52 and 4 Spanish teachers in the case of that discipline, it just seems like there ought to be more.
But you do say, back to what Bob is saying, though, so let's just assume someone is playing, you're teaching chemistry, they taught chemistry for 20 years in the high school, and they're lacking, they have a master's in educational leadership, and they don't have the 18 credit hours. There ought to be some way.
Well, the other thing is there could be some tailoring too. So let's say somebody has that experience. Wouldn't it be possible for an institution to say, well, let's look at these 3 courses, let's say for 9 credits. We look at the various competencies that are required in each one of those classes. We see in this one you met about 60%, in this one 50%, in another one maybe 70%. Wouldn't it be possible to tailor some personalized instruction that would fill in those gaps so that somebody could get through that more quickly and in a more sort of condensed format.
It was kind of what Kale did with Learning Counts, you know, the Council on Adult and Experiential Education, when they went into with higher ed and they would work with Learning Counts to figure out how you could quantify the learning of adults who came back and get credit for that. And, you know, I think we need to find some way to at least agree about what a recommendation might look in this regard, even if it's still going to be done at the level of the institutions, even if they're going to have to still figure out how to do that. Is there some sort of a recommendation we should be thinking about that says, you know, Floyd City, I don't even know what Floyd City is, but is that where Todd is? So, you know, why don't we work with, you know, Vincent's, Ivy Tech, Purdue Northwest, who else do we have at the table? IU, whoever could actually, the independent colleges could make some recommendations that we might be able to cobble together some language that you could consider in advance of our next meeting. And, you know, we could kind of work on that along with some of the other recommendations. What we would like to do is to be able to at least have a draft of recommendations that we can shop with you before we come to that next meeting. And then whatever there are gaps or whatever you think there are real obstacles with. So seems we're going to have to take on that responsibility.
Can you add WGU at least?
Yes, we will definitely. I will talk to Allison Bell and at WGU to figure out how they did that. It's also the same case with Southern New Hampshire University. They were the first state to actually be acknowledged by U.S. Department of Education in terms of how they were doing competency-based education. So, but obviously actually Purdue Global may be doing some of this now too. So we do have some places in Indiana that we could check. And I think this is one of those strategies that would help us as we think leading up to 2022, you know, but.
If the colleges would be worried about tuition not coming from teachers a year or so after 2022, they would be really worried because there just would be less students who would have taken dual credit and courses and had that head start toward college. I think they'll rather than you know matriculate in, they would stay home. And,
well, when I look at how higher ed has embraced dual credit for students, and one can make the same argument, you have to say that higher ed has embraced dual credit for the most part. You know, and they've actually now have 64% of students graduating from high school with some sort of dual credit, and that means they're entering college, a lot of them with 12 or 30 credit hours, and so it's not as if we don't have some precedent for this in terms of being, you know, in this case student focused, in this case teacher focused. So I think we can work on that because that's where we all sort of started. This tested experience just made so much sense to us, but we didn't get anywhere with it the last time. So we will double down and see if we can think of something to say. We're open to your suggestions as well. And I will talk to WGU, and you can too. We can talk to them together.
I did like Katie's idea of getting over the hump of the next few years. We may recommend something that would get us to a place where then, as you said, we would just have an ongoing group in these courses and things would be going well, but I'm just worried about the immediate future.
Right. Well, what about some of the residency programs that we're talking about, these 5-year teacher prep programs? Couldn't you come out with the experience then to be a dual credit teacher with the 5-year programs and really get some of those programs to focus on that?
Our program does. Our program, you
So maybe that should be one of our recommendations as well, which is as we develop these residency programs, have them be really, some of them really focused on. And then you tackle that problem at the very beginning. You know, you don't have to keep revisiting. This is where I get really worried, is that this is going to be a problem that's going to continue to exist if we don't find some of those kind of solutions.
So is it worth then, if there's the action step with the higher education and really thinking through some of the options of credentialing, is there an opportunity And I'd be glad to connect with Jason, Tom, Alicia. I think those are our K-12 folks. You know, might tap into some higher ed as well to try to capture current models, Terry, as well, right, Janet? Current models that are successful. So we have 2 concurrent action items running.
Todd, remember Todd too, so.
Todd as well, yeah. I mean, I'd be glad to do a Google shared doc where we can just throw some best practice examples on, and we could have both those running in parallel.
The model that we haven't discussed yet, and I briefly mentioned it last time, is what, well, I just call it the IU model because I work at IU, and I'm introducing it, so I can name it. Is this, and this, my deep apologies to your partners on the table, this is a model that only works for institutions that provide graduate coursework, but it is possible to design a teacher induction, monitoring, and support models that the graduate course institutions that provide graduate coursework can utilize, whereby new teachers can be brought in and put in the graduate program and then trained appropriately to teach dual credit concurrent with their own graduate course taking. This happens on our campuses. HLC allows this, and in fact, in our most recent HLC assurance argument, we mentioned, as we described our dual credit program, we mentioned that by 2022, our teachers would be fully credentialed walking in the door or would be enrolled in the graduate program. And our model, components of our model will be included in our HLC update, our regular update. So my point is, there is another model that solves a bit of the, oh my gosh, it's August 15th, my history teacher won the lottery, she's no longer, I say that rather than getting hit by a bus, that's so negative, so I like the lottery winner. Won the lottery, she doesn't want to teach anymore, so Tom calls me and we have one of his teachers apply to our graduate program. If they're enrollable, then we train them to be one of our teachers and they can jump in. That is a model. It's not available to every institution, but it has the weird elegance of just sort of being how we train teachers and university instructors anyway, like institutions that provide graduate
So is that
instruction.
replicable? Or is that replicable?
There's no reason why Purdue cannot do the same thing. Now, our commitment, speaking of commitment, we're committed to this. We pay the tuition, but we're covering the cost of the tuition for our teachers, both through carving out some of that money from appropriations to do so, IU money, and also through the grants we've received. I mean, so this is not teachers not paying for the graduate coursework. Purdue would need to, and whoever else, and yes, state, Ball State, et cetera. I'm looking at Becca back there. Sorry, Becca. This is something that we believe is firmly doable. The model has to really meet muster HLC peer review. I mean, we have to be able to convince any peer reviewer from HLC walking into one of our engaged interviews for that process that this wasn't an end around the problem, but a real true replication of the kind of graduate support and graduate coursework we offer.
Anything else we should be thinking about? Obviously, the discussion that we haven't had today is the one that you sort of just hit on there, which is how do we pay for everything that we want to do? What's the funding, either what's happening now out there, how individual places or community organizations or community foundations or schools are carving out of their appropriation or whatever they're doing, but what are the mixed fundings, the way we've braided some of this money between K-12 and higher ed. So we may either choose to be silent or make a recommendation in the funding area as well.
I think we should not be silent, especially with Representative Bainey. We had the opportunity to, and our other representatives and senators on the committee. I look at Representative Bainey because we were in a meeting together on Friday, where I believe South Carolina and Colorado shared their models with the Fairbanks Foundation, and South Carolina shared, I believe it was South Carolina who shared that they have also worked to scale dual credit across their state. You mentioned 64% scaled in Indiana, incredible. And South Carolina has shifted to incentivizing credentials. If they want to encourage stacked credentials, let's make sure the right dual credit courses are being offered. And I believe they said $1,000 per credential. and for per high value credential. But that is how they have shifted. It goes back to what you asked about incentive, Jason. You shared you have incentive because you believe it's what's best for kids, and that's what you're driving as a superintendent. But what if that is valuable in the state of Indiana? How do we consider
The
incentive?
other thing she doesn't share with you
What is that?
was
What
in
is that?
South Carolina, the state does not pay for dual credit courses. Remember, they had to go
Yeah.
with philanthropy.
Yes,
to
and
So
they're
they
also
are
a little messy in CTE as well.
Yeah, they're
so that's
very,
fair.
Yeah, and the state of Indiana
Yeah.
gives a lot of money. Well, we pay dual credit, and we also fund a lot more in CTE K-12
Yeah.
than the two states that were represented there.
We'll keep pressing on each other behind the scenes. Don't
Yes.
worry. But,
Well,
it's just an
you know,
option.
I think, this is against the backdrop of why this is so important. The commission just put out our second equity report, and if you want to look at where underrepresented populations, first generation students, and the preparation they're getting, if they don't have the opportunity to get dual credit and repeat, if they're not taking the core 40, the academic honors diploma, if they're not a 21st century scholar, all these things are contributing to whether they're going to college or whether they're succeeding in college. And that means that whether it is a poor urban area or a poor rural area or everything else in between, it has to be available for people to take it if they're going to actually have a fair shot. That equity report basically says life circumstance shouldn't dictate opportunity. I know we're focused with this group right now about the teacher credentialing. The reason why the teacher credentialing is important is that the dual credit is important. So.
In terms of funding models, there's sort of another issue too, and that is getting back to what we were talking about earlier with blended approaches and using technology, where you're not using the high school teacher to fully teach that course, but there is some load of that teacher in helping to facilitate certain assignments, certain experiments, if it's a lab work, whatever it is. And I don't know whether we need to rethink that model so that there's something in between having the $50 per credit hour if the high school teacher teaches the course and is
It's now $40 a credit hour. It's not $50 anymore.
Well, true, but that model in any case versus another model in which the district or is not being charged by the college if the faculty member is teaching the course. If the college faculty member is the faculty member of record, right now the district has to come up with the money, or the students have to pay the full tuition. But is there, if we could employ the high school teachers to contribute to the teaching load, so that you strike this balance between reducing the amount of effort that the college teacher has to put into it, therefore they shouldn't be charged. The college doesn't need the full tuition, but on the other hand, you're hitting the balance where it's still appropriate for the faculty member at the college to be the faculty member of record. So in other words, they're teaching, 60% of the course. The high school teacher is teaching 40% or contributing to 40% of the instruction. I don't know, it's just an idea, but as we talk about technology and trying to leverage technology as a way to leverage our faculty resources, it's something at least to consider.
Well, we said we would consider everything, right? So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I really like Katie's point earlier about bifurcate, really kind of make sure we're looking at the components you're trying to crystallize exactly what components. I guess I would just add, and maybe this isn't what we should be doing, but I wonder if there's a section in here that we be a little more, and maybe just one more time for everybody to make sure we're on the same page, about some of the constraints and also complicators. So for instance, something that I just heard about electronic credentials. One of Indiana put itself, we're sort of in a spot here with dual credit because we've done so many great things, right? I mean, we're almost being punished for being too out in front, getting too much, you're really pushing for this, really getting folks involved. Another one of those aspects, I think, is how much credit accumulation students are having, right? We know that great reports from the commission, students with 0 dual credit do fairly, there's a big difference between having 0 dual credits and some, a difference between some and a semester, and a difference between a semester and a full, right? But again, the complication of achieving excellence here, right? 30 plus dual credits for any individual student is we've demonstrated can be very valuable. But that puts an incredible strain on the distribution of all the dual credits across in an equitable fashion potentially, or do we know that? So I'd really like for us to think a little bit about, someone's asking, are the right students getting the opportunity? And is there just kind of a max capacity for offering, and are we risking it being coagulated in hot spots and not and not as distributed as equitably and towards our goals as possible? I don't know what that looks like, but I want to make sure that that's not a complicator to what we're really trying to achieve. Because I think we're really trying to achieve touching as many students as possible with a level that really does have an impact.
It helps, and I'll tell you what, a lot of other states are jealous of the fact that the legislature put in place a requirement for every school to have 2 dual credits and 2 AP courses. I mean, that immediately sets the stage for some level of equity. It may not be, implemented with fidelity, but at least there is a statement that no matter where you go to school, it should be available.
And the equity, that's enormous in our state right now. If we dig into the data, a couple things I'll point to. One is SEL, that is specifically targeted, right? Specifically targeted districts and potentially at-risk populations. Another is, and Laura mentioned this earlier, but ICAP was established by the legislature to help with equity and access. And is that accomplishing what it needs to be yet? I don't know, but we have to look at that equity piece. Absolutely.
If we're also, I'm sorry to change the tone here, but I think that one of the things on here is this idea of delivery models. And if we are going to go to things like blended models online, things like that, then we really need to look at the infrastructure of the state in terms of, are there dead spots in this state where you don't have that high resolution, high access, and that is a problem and an impediment to those types implementation of those types of models at the graduate level for classroom teachers or at the undergraduate level for high school students.
You mean the availability of broadband?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know that the legislature is trying to deal with that one as well, but I know that there's still a challenge in some places. So identifiable.
Yeah.
So we're closing in on time here. Welcome, Gail.
Was this at one time at 3?
No, it's 1 to 3. I don't think it was ever. I don't know. I didn't send
I had
out.
it on my calendar at 3. But can I say, I do have something to say. I thought we were just getting going here.
Oh, no. We were actually getting ready to stop, but we were happy to hear from you.
Thank you. I looked at the suggestions, and I suppose that's what you all have looked at today. And again, I apologize. I heard it at 3 on my phone, but some of them are fine in our view, clearly. But most of them put it back on the district to figure out a way. And basically, we found out this summer we had a lot more money than we thought we did as a state. We have well over $2 billion in a functional surplus, and we have $410 million more than we thought this budget was going to result in. And so I did some number crunching with this chart we were given last time. And if you've already discussed this, you can stop me, but I took like a worst case scenario, worst case in quotes, of what we need in terms of total credit hours. And if you go all the way, and as of 2018, if you cover all of this, which obviously these are done, so if you cover all of this but the last column, which was
the ones who are furthest away from getting it done. It totals at the high end, absolute high end, a bit over 18,000 credit hours total. And then I tried to find out how much it costs at universities today per graduate credit hour, and that was a bit more difficult. I just saw the suggestions yesterday, and so I went online and, you know, understandably so, universities don't just, you know, put that out there. Because everybody's different, everybody's program is different. But I did see one university did have it out there, and it was $410 a credit hour, and I assume that's low in today's world. I don't know. When I went to law school, it was $150 a credit hour in Bloomington in the Ice Age. But just say it's $1,000 a credit hour, which I think is high, and I'm already assuming high, because we're taking the worst case scenario. That's $18 million over the next 3 years. To put it bluntly, and I don't hope no one's taking minutes here, but buy our way out of it. I'll say it differently then. Invest our way out of this problem. And yes, we have an issue with master's degrees going forward and teacher compensation, and I'll tell you, people are working on that. But for the immediate future, for this amount of money, when the state has money, it's a one-time cost to get our teachers who we know do the work well. We've all sat here for years saying we have a program pretty much second to none. Instead of laying it on their laps and on the district's laps where they, you know, they don't know where their next dollar's coming from half the time. Let's just invest in these teachers in this period of time. The universities will get their money, and there won't be a turf war over this. I don't believe having higher ed take this job over is the answer. I don't think ISTA believes that. You know, teachers who have taught this over the years certainly don't deserve that. They've done the work. So I would say let's be bold and make a recommendation that would say, state of Indiana, let's figure out who needs what, and you know, get them in the program they need and move on. I mean, this is a problem we can actually fix.
For the short term, how are you gonna fix it for the long
Well,
term?
that's all part of compensation, and we're gonna have to deal with that. I totally get that. But, you know, we can't, you know, somebody used to always say, don't make perfect the enemy of good. And we're in good shape in this state, and we've been wringing our hands over this for years now, and we have this opportunity to fix it for everybody. And, you know, if it means, okay, so we say what, you know, we tell certain teachers, you know, it's not just for any graduate credit. I mean, it has to be targeted and, you know, to get them qualified. And the districts won't have to worry about, you know, we're gonna fix the dual credit problem, but, you know, oh, you know, what are we gonna do about paying everybody else something next year, in addition? And I don't know, maybe it's too simple. I've been around long enough to know that, you know, sometimes we have to complicate things. But it just occurred to me last night when I was looking at this, that it's not even 18 or 20 million, whatever it might be at the most, in 1 year. It's over the next 3 years. It's a solution, I think. So I'm sorry I'm late. I truly meant to be here on time to be a part of this discussion, as you can see. But anyway, that's really it. I don't, you know, we don't believe this work has to be farmed out somewhere else. We don't, just because some outside entity came in and changed the rules on everybody, we don't, obviously the idea of regional might help some small districts work things out, but that, those kind of things we can talk about in more detail. But I know that our members and teachers in general would be happy to know that this, this problem has a solution, and that the state's willing to help out. I mean, it wasn't they didn't cause it, the district didn't cause it, kids certainly didn't cause it, parents think this is a great thing. It's win, 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 win. At a time when I think we can all look ourselves in the mirror and say the state can afford this.
Any response?
One thing, Gail, that we did talk about is all ideas should be on the table, right? The couple other pieces we talked about is in the beginning of the meeting, we had the opportunity to hear about the STEM Teacher Recruitment Fund grants, where the state has put quite a bit of money in, and we have teachers in that, and part of the interest is, what's the return on investment there? Because my goodness, if it's a great return on investment, maybe that's an opportunity to shift more money. So I think it's an opportunity. We have to consider everything at this point. I just appreciate you taking the time to do all that math and
it was kind of simple math,
and your thought on it. So, and I think the other question I would say is Commissioner Lovers asked about we have a short-term runway to solve, and we have a long-term runway to solve. And I think that the challenge that this group has is what's our long-term runway to solve. And so how anything that we come up with, what's the sustainability of it, so that 5 years down the road we can just keep on improving as Indiana.
Right. And I totally agree. The work of this council and the focus on dual credit doesn't end with what I am suggesting. I just think we can get something off the table that has been like this weight or albatross around our necks, and each day time goes by.
You might be able to help us in this way, in that one of the discussions we had is that we have a significant number of teachers who are not interested in doing this because either their age, they're not going to go back at a certain age, although we know some over 55, some other reasons. So even if they know there is financial incentive there, not all will want to do this. So, we need to look at multiple ways, and certainly funding is one of those. I think all of us would acknowledge that making it possible for people to come back and figure out how to do this, and then how to reward them once they have those credentials, and what's the situation for them then that actually encourages them to do this. What's the payback for doing that? So I think those are discussions that we need to have as well. So glad you got here. Sorry that you weren't able to hear the earlier part of the conversation. It is taped, and so I think would she be able to watch it if she wanted to?
Sure.
So you'll be able to watch that, and then what we're going to try to do, and then I will get to you, Representative Porter, too, because I saw your hand going up there. But we're going to try to circulate some ideas that have been from today and previous meetings. The two documents that we provided to you were actually 2016 documents, so they've been out there for a while. We've added a few new ideas today, and then we're going to try to have you look at that in advance so that when we come together for our final meeting, before we make recommendations, you'll have had a chance to put your fingerprints on things one more time.
Okay.
Representative Porter.
Thank you. I have just a couple questions for people to marinate on it. Probably some sidebars that happen after this. Do we still have National Board Certified Teachers? Do we still have that program?
I thought we did.
We can in Indiana, yes. We have very few who are actually National Board certified, but every state still has that
Okay,
opportunity.
so in this discussion, and we're doing that, is there a way to blend that or looking at National Board Certified Teachers to help move people into the dual credit scenario? I mean, that's something that we worked on years ago, but it kind of faded away.
I don't hear anything about it anymore.
I know, that's it, but when we were doing it was for a while, but it's kind of faded away again. I think because there was a cost there. And, when we talked about money, and Bob talked about, some of those dollars being privately funded. The Luma Foundation is here. I haven't heard much about them lately in regards to if they think about dual credit or complete college for America. I mean, there are other entities out there, and I don't know what is transpiring with those other groups that try to help us even move forward with dual credit. Because from my perspective, from my small window of only 18 years on education, I think those are important partners to this whole scenario as we move forward. And I'm just throwing that out to let it marinate a little bit with people. Maybe somebody come up and be a little more creative than I am in regards to that, because I just have a lot of questions. I have many answers and not many solutions. But I tell you one thing, I know the whereases of being here for going to 28 years with Bob here, and therefore the whereas is still the same, and therefore we still really haven't moved. Only things moved is we went from one century to another.
I think both those, the National Board Certified, and we should look at that. And then we did have a brief discussion about philanthropy. Where we've been most successful with philanthropy seems to be in the community foundation world, or the local communities. I don't know, Lumina and Strata and those groups, because they're national organizations. It might be interesting from the standpoint of if something that we do is scalable and is actually replicable in other states. They wouldn't be interested in doing it
This
just
is their home state.
I know.
You gotta take the petri dish. You gotta develop it here.
Yeah.
Then move it out.
They don't always see it.
But I think those are I think if you're looking at both, you're looking at one from a preparation standpoint and one from a funding standpoint, and both of those are, I think things that we need to be considering. So, this has been a great meeting, I think, and we've really spent the time to work on some of these issues. So, the lion's share of this work, between Katie and Ken and Terry and folks there, we'll try to assimilate some of these ideas and share them with you. But, if you have any suggestions at all, or things that you want us to consider, or things that you think we should make sure that the recommendations are there, you don't have to wait until we circulate a document before that. It's not that much time. It's October, 21st or something? Yeah, we're talking about no time at all. So, let us know sooner rather than later. Yeah. So, anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn?
I think you should bring back the Education Roundtable. You asked, I told you.
I don't have a very good poker face.
I don't play poker either.
Thank you, everybody.